On top of that, 5 states begin in-person early voting this week. Minnesota, South Dakota, Virginia, and Wyoming open polls Friday, and New Jersey begins on Saturday. In total, 38 states plus Washington, D.C. allow early voting, but the rules vary, so check with your Secretary of State or local elections board for specifics where you are. Nicole Killian, Nancy Cordes, and Ed O'Keefe join me now. Nicole is a CBS News correspondent. Nancy is CBS News chief congressional correspondent. And Ed is a CBS News political correspondent. Welcome to you all. Nancy, I want to start with you. You are in Tempe. Our latest CBS News battleground tracker now shows Joe Biden leading, but within the margin of error. We last had this race tied in Arizona as of July. What are you hearing from voters there on the ground, and how has the state changed since 2016?
Well, Elaine, I can't remember the last time that I spoke to Democratic voters who were so angry in advance of an election. They were swearing, they were calling Donald Trump all kinds of names. They really disliked this president, and frankly, it wasn't reserved just for Democrats. We talked to independents, even some Republicans, who said they cannot vote for President Trump. And notably, the Republicans I spoke to who are sticking with him said that they're doing so out of allegiance to the party rather than out of allegiance to him and his own political record. Now, it's important to note I'm here in Maricopa County. It's not the most conservative part of the state. We might encounter voters who feel differently if we had headed out into more rural areas. But here in Maricopa County, coronavirus is clearly having a big impact on the race. We talked to voter after voter who were frustrated by the way coronavirus was handled, and the battleground tracker backed that up. It found that voters, right and left, give Joe Biden a 13-point edge when it comes to who can handle the coronavirus better. And more than once, I talked to voters who said that they felt anyone could handle it better than President Trump has.
Well, Nicole, you have some new reporting on a pair of new Biden ads targeting black men in key swing states. You got an exclusive preview of the ads. Let's go ahead and watch.
Big thing that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris can do is just rebuild trust.
I'm not going to agree with everything that anyone says. My wife will tell you that from the beginning. But who do I trust my children's future to? I trust Joe Biden more than anyone else.
Nicole, why focus specifically on black men?
Well, certainly the Biden campaign is focused on African-American voters as a whole, but in terms of African-American men, it comes down to one key number, and that is 13%. 13% of African-American men voted for President Trump in 2016, 3 times the number that black women did, who overwhelmingly supported Hillary Clinton. So from that standpoint, the campaign does feel like it has some work to do. And interestingly, I was on a call with some members of the Biden campaign with one of its co-chairs saying that he doesn't think the Trump campaign will reach those numbers this time around, particularly because of this moment of racial reckoning that we are in, because, as Nancy alluded to, a dissatisfaction with the president's handling of the pandemic, which has disproportionately affected people of color, and even some of the disrespect that he has shown to some African-American male leaders, like the late John Lewis. So from that standpoint, they do think that they can close the gap here. But make no mistake, the Trump campaign is continuing to court black men as well. We saw that in the Republican National Convention with folks like Tim Scott. They have other surrogates, Herschel Walker, the former football player who recently voiced an ad for the campaign. They have opened Black Voices for Trump offices in a number of cities and also put up ads in urban areas.
Well, Ed, we are talking about this 50-day countdown until November 3rd, but there remains a possibility that vote counting extends beyond the first Tuesday of the month. So how are the campaigns preparing for a possible legal battle?
Well, and I think everyone should be preparing for it to go beyond Election Day. I think we're looking at least a week, perhaps 2 or 3, before every state is able to really give us a signal and give us a sense of how they did. And that isn't necessarily a bad thing. If you want your vote counted, it could just take a little while longer because there's an unprecedented demand for absentee ballots and therefore an unprecedented stress on the system. And in order to get it done accurately, it's going to take a little while. Both campaigns, we know, Elaine, are lawyering up, in essence. The Biden campaign announcing today that they have hundreds of lawyers across the country, most of them prepared in a pro bono way to help out if need be. The legal team is led by the Biden general counsel, who's now being helped by people like Bob Bauer, the former White House counsel to Barack Obama, who has worked with Democratic campaigns in the past, two former solicitors general, or the government attorney that argues cases before the Supreme Court, are now also on board as well, helping out, which is perhaps a signal that they know that they may need to take something all the way to the Supreme Court during the potential count or recount of ballots later this fall. And Eric Holder, the former attorney general, is also on board as a sort of liaison between the Biden campaign and what they will do with the DNC and what various entities across the country are doing to keep an eye out for voter suppression concerns, ballot access issues, any other potential dirty tricks that are pulled by people over the course of this. Both sides understand that there could be, at one time, 4 or 5 states in Florida 2000-like situations where you either have prolonged counts and disputes over the kinds of ballots that are being counted or rejected, or the potential for recounts in close elections, depending on how things go. As elections officials will tell you, please let it be a blowout so that at least there's no dispute. Nothing suggests it's going to be a blowout on either side necessarily overall, so it's very likely that we'll all be waiting a little while beyond Election Day for a result. 50 days to go until Election Day, then the countdown begins and how long it takes until we actually have a result.
Right. Well, Nancy, President Trump is in Arizona today for the 5th time this year. Joe Biden has not been there since 2018. How do voters feel about that?
It really depends on their political bent, Elaine. Republicans sort of mock Biden. They say they don't really know where his campaign is, where he is. They want to know why he isn't out and about. Most Democrats we spoke to were pretty understanding. In fact, one nurse practitioner said she's actually really glad every time she sees Joe Biden and Kamala Harris wearing masks in public because she thinks that it sends the right message when Donald Trump has so rarely worn a mask in public. But there were Democrats and independents who said that they do want to hear more from Joe Biden nevertheless. Even if he isn't here in the state holding events, they want to hear more from him about his policies, his plans. They want to hear more from him about policing, about coronavirus, the economy. So, they want to know that he's engaged and they want to know that he is speaking to their issues. It is notable in this reliably red state, Elaine, that Biden has pulled ahead, at least by a few points, in our latest battleground tracker. This is a state that President Trump won in 2016 by nearly 4 points. So we asked voters, what do you think is going on? What is the shift caused by? And they gave us a number of answers. They said, first of all, the Latino population here in Arizona has only grown over the past 4 years. Joe Biden has an edge with Latinos, according to our battleground tracker, 62% of them saying they're going to support him. And also California residents have been moving here in a steady trickle over the past few years, looking for jobs, looking for a lower cost of living. And then, of course, the coronavirus, which was such a huge issue here in Arizona this summer, with a very large spike that is still receding in September. And so that is really top of mind for a lot of voters as well.
Oh, really fascinating to hear about those dynamics. Well, Nicole, before heading to Arizona for a campaign event, President Trump flew to California for a briefing on the historically large wildfires out west. And I want to play an exchange between the president and the head of California's Natural Resources Agency. Let's listen.
We want to work with you to really recognize the changing climate and what it means to our forests and actually work together with that science. That science is going to be key, because if we ignore that science and sort of put our head in the sand and think it's all about vegetation management, we're not going to succeed together protecting Californians.
Okay. It'll start getting cooler. You just watch.
I wish science agreed with you.
Hey, well, I don't think science knows, actually.
So President Trump appeared to insist that global warming will somehow reverse itself. And we know, though, at this point, after years of study, there is this scientific consensus that the Earth's climate is warming due to human activities. Where do each campaign stand on climate change?
Striking about that exchange is that before the president went to California, when he was still here in Las Vegas, he was also asked on the tarmac about some comments he made here over the weekend, where he suggested that forest management is what was needed to kind of contain and control these wildfires. And, you know, he was asked about his views on that, to explain those comments and whether or not he does support climate change or the idea that it exists. And he pretty much dodged that part of it and focused on the forest management, that, you know, trees and brush get dry, they go up like matchsticks, as he put it, you know, that it's really about getting better control of these fire lines. And look, we know the president in the past has called climate change a hoax, but yet on the flip side, just a couple of days ago, he was calling himself an environmentalist, perhaps the greatest environmentalist since Teddy Roosevelt, when he was in Florida and he signed a moratorium on offshore drilling. So while he has done some environmentally friendly things, he also has rolled back a number of environmental regulations, and of course has been a strong proponent of energy independence, which of course relies a lot on fossil fuels. To the contrast, you have former Vice President Biden, who today really lit into the president, literally and figuratively, calling him a climate arsonist. And the former vice president has put forth a $2 trillion climate plan, one in which that he wants to get back to some of the initiatives under the Obama-Biden administration, with more of a focus on green jobs, clean energy, and investing in renewable energy infrastructure.
All right, a lot of developments. I thank you all for helping us sift through them. Nicole Killian, Nancy Curtis, and Ed O'Keefe, thanks very much. As we head into the final sprint of the presidential election, campaigns are doing everything they can to organize and get people out to vote. Our Caitlin Huey-Burns takes a look at the impact a large group of voters described as the rising American electorate could have on the outcome in November.
A lot of us have this kind of like woke mentality where we're paying a lot more attention to the issues around us.
Voters like Dante Phillips are among the most coveted this election cycle.
If you really want young people to vote, you're going to have to talk about things that they're interested in.
A recent college graduate, Phillips is part of what's called the rising American electorate, made up of young voters, people of color, and unmarried women. Combined, these three groups account for over half of the people who voted in 2016. And in 2020, turnout among this group could be even higher if campaigns effectively engage them.
With the incredible energy and commitment to our democracy coming out of the George Floyd protests, we're seeing increased interest in voting and increased interest in learning how to participate in our democracy.
Tom Lopatch is the CEO of the nonpartisan Voter Participation Center, an organization helping to register and mobilize this group of voters during a pandemic.
We are living in a moment more than ever where Americans are seeing the direct connection between their lives, their challenges, their opportunities, and how government serves them.
But that doesn't mean they are willing to just hand over their vote.
I honestly think that 50 and under in the African-American realm are starting to realize that we don't have to be devoted to a party, that we need parties to be devoted to us.
Corey Prince is a community organizer in the key battleground of Wisconsin and has a message for both political parties.
The voters feel disengaged. They feel unheard. They feel that the issues that are important to them are not on the mouths of the politicians who are trying to be elected or want to be representing the people.
You're not seeing that ground level, person-to-person engagement that you're describing. You're not seeing that.
Not at all. Not at all.
While turnout among young voters and Asian Americans increased slightly in 2016, turnout among African Americans dropped. And overall, nearly 7% of eligible voters in the rising American electorate didn't vote 4 years ago.
Do you think that there will be people who say, why should I vote? What difference is it going to make?
There's like idea that people are apathetic about this election. And I reject that apathy. And the only reason that I do is because I don't think it's apathy. I think the problem is access.
Victoria Sandoval is a 24-year-old living in Texas, a state with one of the largest shares of the rising American electorate. One barrier to voting is registration. This group is transient, moving between election cycles and less likely to own a home. They're also more likely to live below the poverty line.
I understand not wanting to engage with the system, but I also think that if every single person who is an eligible voter who feels that way did engage with the system and did vote, our country would look so different.
The pandemic and racial injustice are the major issues that cut across these groups and have become a rallying cry to get engaged in the process.
It is time for us to change our ways of performative action and to make actual change.
Enthusiasm is one thing, converting it into voting is another.
I'm not worried about people not turning out. I'm worried about how accessible this election is going to end up being for people who need to vote, whose voices need to be heard.
I feel like people are aware of the size of the demographic, but I'm not sure if they're aware of the impact, depending on how this election plays out. I'm sure people will become more aware of just like how influential our demographic is.
And the Center for Voter Participation and its partners have registered 1 million people this year and plan to send 37 million applications to vote by mail. And Elaine, I know we've been marking the 50 days into Election Day, but let's also remember that voting starts in 4 states this Friday.
A really key point, really fascinating piece, Caitlin. How could expanded vote by mail options help when it comes to turnout?
Well, what's really interesting in the research that we saw from the Voter Participation Center is that access to mail-in voting is more prevalent, or interest in mail-in voting is more prevalent among Latino voters and Asian Americans. In 2016, Latino voters and Asian American voters voted at a higher rate by mail than their counterparts in the rising American electorate. So the goal for some of these registration groups is to target these voters, but also in states where vote by mail is new and expanded. So not just states where they're used to doing it, but trying to educate voters on how to send in their ballot. This also could be a big challenge for members of the rising American electorate because they are a more transient group. They move between election cycles. So finding where they are registered and where their home addresses are could be one of the challenges to look out for.
All right, really interesting trends. Caitlin Huey-Burns for us. Caitlin, thank you very much. Coming up, what's behind Joe Biden's lead in Arizona, plus President Trump's chances of flipping Minnesota. We'll break that down with our elections and surveys director, Anthony Salvanto. Stay with us. You're streaming Red and Blue.
Go to the ends of the earth.
Right now.
We got something crazy. Boom. And reach for the stars.
Here we are.
Time.
Yes, it's my comeback.
Hey, this is pretty fun.
But wait, there's more. Experience thought-provoking.
Welcome to the idea of being a human being.
Innovative and truly original reporting.
Look through a telescope and go, wow.
Because there's always something new under the sun on CBS Sunday morning.
COVID has taken the lives of tens of thousands of Americans. Rural areas like this here on Navajo Nation are especially hit hard.
15 to 30% of our Navajo citizens don't have running water.
In any indigenous reservation, there is a shortage of physicians.
Native Americans are amongst the most vulnerable and hardest hit by COVID.
Yeah, the more we lose our elders to COVID-19, the more we lose our language and our way of life.
We need to bring awareness to the attention of Washington, D.C. and United States citizens that there is a need to focus on the first citizens of this country.
In 60 years, we went from about 100,000 factory workers to probably about 7,000.
Off in the distance, you can see some factories that are still humming, but most of them are just kind of abandoned.
The restaurant industry right now is one of the largest and fastest growing industries in America. And yet it continues to be the absolute lowest paying employer in the United States.
Barely anybody's making enough to live.
You're donating plasma to get by.
It's literally a slave wage.
I don't remember growing up like this. My mom didn't have to go to food banks. It's pretty sad.
Even really young kids are feeling what's going on right now. How should parents be talking to them about this whole question of racial justice?
How do we embrace this moment and turn it into real change?
What we really must focus on is moving from protesting to policy.
Join Gail, Anthony, and Tony on CBS This Morning.
CBSN Los Angeles. Get local news, breaking news, anytime, anywhere.
It's easy to find us, and it's free.
Download the CBS News app on your favorite devices. CBSN Los Angeles, streaming 24/7.
You can watch CBSN 24/7.
We've got an amazing story to share with you.
I understand you have some breaking news.
How does it all play out?
It's quite an adventure here at CBSN.
It's been a day.
A new CBS News Battleground Tracker poll shows former Vice President Joe Biden leading in a state that has been in the Republican column all but once since President Eisenhower. The Democratic presidential nominee has a 3-point lead in Arizona. Back in July, our poll showed a tied race. And about 1,600 miles north, Biden has a big lead on the president in Minnesota. For more, let's bring in CBS News Director of Elections and Surveys, Anthony Salvanto. Hey there, Anthony. So what's behind Joe Biden's lead in Arizona?
Hey there, Elaine. So as you mentioned, we have Joe Biden up, and that's 3 points more than he had in July. Well, behind that shift is, quite frankly, dissatisfaction with the way that the president has handled the COVID outbreak. And we've seen that really across the Sun Belt, putting a lot of states in play, including Arizona. Let me break that down for you very specifically. In a week where there were new questions about how the president handled this in the early going, we tested both sides of this argument. Could the pandemic have been mitigated a little bit had plans been made sooner? Well, 68% of Arizonans agreed with that idea, but comparably fewer, 46%, said, yeah, but the president also made plans that staved off a worse outbreak. And they thought, well, things could have been higher, things could have been worse had he not done what he did. So you compare those two numbers, and what it really adds up to, Elaine, is a 13-point gap in favor of Joe Biden on perceptions of who might handle the outbreak better. That is closely correlated with vote, and that's one reason why he's taken that slight edge, Elaine.
Well, Joe Biden is also leading in Minnesota. Hillary Clinton narrowly won the state in 2016. Could President Trump flip it?
Well, at this point, we see Joe Biden with a 9-point edge. So Minnesota looks like the Minnesota that we knew before 2016 when it was so close. Let me tell you why that's so important. If we look at the battleground tracker map right now, where Arizona's a toss-up and Minnesota is leaning towards Joe Biden, let's suppose, just hypothetically here, that Joe Biden were to win Arizona. So I'll put that in blue. Well, Arizona, with its 11 electoral votes, there's an almost even trade-off there if the president can go up in the Midwest, where he did so well last time, and if he were able to, say, put a Minnesota in his column, I turn it there red hypothetically, well, then that helps him if he can leverage some of that support among white working class voters and then go around to Michigan or Wisconsin and take one of those states too. So it's very much a trade-off that could be happening right there, but as I noted, really in favor of the Democrats right now. And let me show you what we get when we look at a key group in Minnesota, and that is voters with college degrees, among whom Joe Biden has a very large lead. And if there's really one group that you want to watch in all potential swing states, it's white women with college degrees, among whom Joe Biden not only has a substantial edge, but it's much better than what the Democrats got in 2016, much better than Hillary Clinton did among this group. And so that's helping move Minnesota back closer into that Democratic column, Elaine.
Well, Anthony, we're 50 days out. Will we know results out of these states on election night itself?
Okay, we will know some results. We might know everything if it's a blowout. We are urging patience, but I want to emphasize there's a difference between having patience in account and both not knowing anything and knowing the wrong thing. Let me show you a deeper dive here. I'm going to go into Arizona just to stay on the example. This is Arizona, the way the decision desk on election night will look at Arizona. Now, at the moment, we imagine that we can take all of the upper part, all these smaller counties, and what we can do is we can combine all those counties together and give you an estimate of the way things are trending. And then we're going to dive into, let's say, Maricopa County, which is Phoenix. Now, this is where the bulk of the state's votes are going to be cast, 60% probably. And that makes up, let's say it estimates to 1.7 million ballots that are going to be cast there. Well, we're going to tell you how many of those ballots have been counted so far. So let's suppose that 500,000 of them, just to use an example, have been counted at one point in the night. We're going to tell you that, and we're going to tell you that that is what we're waiting on if we're looking at the rest of the ballots, waiting to see if they come in. But you'll get that information, and we'll also tell you which way it's trending. So if it's a toss-up, like it is here on my hypothetical map, well, we'll tell you it's a toss-up. If it's leaning towards Joe Biden, we'll tell you it's leaning towards Joe Biden at the moment. So we'll give you the information we have. We'll compare it to what we expect to be counted, and we'll know that from voter files, and we'll know that from exit polls. And then we'll put the whole picture together, and, well, it'll take as long as it takes, Elaine.
All right, I know people are already asking questions. Thank you, Anthony Salvanto, for helping to bring some clarity on what we will and will not know on election night. Thanks so much, Anthony.
You're welcome.
Former White House Chief of Staff Andrew Card was the first person to tell President George W. Bush that America was under attack on September 11, 2001. In this video, you can see Card whispering into the president's ear during the visit to a Florida elementary school. President Bush's reaction and subsequent response were defining moments of his presidency. And Andrew Card joins me now. Secretary Card, thanks very much for being with us.
It's an honor to be with you. Thank you for having me on this.
So, as a nation, we are now... I'm so sorry, Mr. Secretary. Go ahead.
No, President Bush was a remarkable leader that day, but when he walked into that classroom, all he had been told was that it appears that a small twin-engine prop plane crashed into one of the towers at the World Trade Center in New York City. I then learned that it wasn't a small twin-engine prop plane, and then I learned of the second plane, and I had to make a decision what to tell the president. I carefully thought about the words I would use and decided I did not want to generate any comments that would cause him to ask me a question or have a debate or make comments, because I assumed a boom microphone was hanging over his head. So all I said to him was, a second plane hit the second tower. America is under attack. It was that moment that I believe he realized the responsibilities, the true responsibilities of being president of the United States, to preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution and the people of this country.
And I want to ask you about that as someone who has, in fact, been there when a president of the United States has been faced with a crisis such as this. As a nation at this moment, we are now facing the COVID-19 pandemic, record wildfires in the West and Northwest, and another hurricane is bearing down on the Gulf Coast even as we speak. What is the role of a president in times of national crisis?
The role is significant. Number one, the president must be a leader. Number two, he should tell the truth and recognize that there's a degree of empathy to the responsibility to lead. So you've got to be empathetic with the victims, empathetic with the people, empathetic with people who are afraid or uncertain. Yes, you want to be optimistic, but you can't be so optimistic that you fail to recognize the gravity of a situation. So it's really best to listen to experts and get good, wise counsel. Taste your words before you spit them out so that you don't create unintended consequences. And I think the most important aspect of presidential leadership is actually one where you engage the American people. Don't think of them as red or blue. And yes, this is a red and blue show, but yes, think of them as Americans. Everyone is impacted by what's happening during a crisis. So you don't pit one side against another. You pull people together. President Bush was elected in a very controversial election. The Supreme Court made the decision. The nation was divided in his early days as president. 9/11, 2001, we stopped being Republicans or Democrats. We were all Americans. And the president was the one who was leading us to come together to fight a common cause and also be cognizant of the concerns that people in the United States have, no matter what their background, no matter what their political philosophy, no matter what their party.
So with that as our framework, I want to ask you about this current administration. President Trump has said repeatedly that no one could have seen this current pandemic coming. But during his time in office, we know that President Bush wanted a federal plan to deal with exactly that. He had read John Barry's book about the 1918 flu pandemic. So what did President Bush do to prepare back then? And how would you evaluate the current administration's handling of the coronavirus?
Well, President Bush, in November of 2005, did rally the executive branch of government to get ready for a pandemic. There wasn't one on the horizon, but he was nervous about it, and he had done a lot of homework. He convened the experts. Tony Fauci was actually one of the experts that he convened, and Julie Gerberding from the CDC. And then he gave a major address at the National Institute of Health on getting ready for a pandemic. He said, I don't know one is coming, but we have to be ready in case one does. It's highly likely. And he put a roadmap out, and he actually challenged Congress to appropriate resources and put plans in place to get ready for a pandemic. So there were expectations that something like what happened in January of this year would happen. And America, unfortunately, did not do what it needed to do to be ready for this. And President Bush tried to get them. There was no appetite in Congress to do it at the time. And unfortunately, we were stuck with what we are. But, you know, every president faces crises. And what you have to do is recognize that a president should be strong leadership that listens to people, tells the truth, and does lead with optimism. After all, you don't want to say, follow me and things will get worse. Nobody will follow you. So you have to be optimistic, but you don't want to be Pollyannish and deny reality. Be candid with the American people. They understand it. They certainly rallied on 9/11. Boy, did the United States come together. And not only that, the world came together to fight the scourge of terrorism. The world has got to come together to fight this challenge of a pandemic. And so I think this leadership that we're seeing today has been strained because of the nature of politics. We are very tribal today. Republicans don't want to talk to Democrats. Democrats don't want to talk to Republicans. And that's not the way it should be. We're all in this together. We should be working together. Wear a mask, social distance, be respectful of others, do the right thing. I know the President Trump, has a tough job to do. I'm empathetic for the kinds of leadership that is needed in the White House, and I know that he gets good advice. I don't think he always follows the advice, and he doesn't taste his words before he spits them out. And sometimes there are unintended consequences to the actions that he is suggesting.
All right, I'm afraid we're out of time. Former White House Chief of Staff Andrew Card. Mr. Card, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us today.
Thank you for having me on. Thank you.
Coming up, we'll talk to reporters in 3 key states this year about what the presidential race is looking like in each so far. An update from Florida, Texas, and North Carolina is next. Your streaming Red and Blue countdown to the vote.
These are hard, tiring, taxing jobs, even before coronavirus came.
This is my Clorox wipes, my Lysol. I have no idea what I'm walking into. I don't know if the customers are carriers.
I feel privileged to be out here when so many people are out of work,
Did you ever think that you would find yourselves at the front line?
We have the opportunity to bring something valuable to the community, and that feels good.
We have to be willing to change policy on a permanent basis to recognize and honor these workers.
It doesn't seem like it's worth the risk that you endure every day.
I have to do what I can to take care of myself and my family.
If you had the choice, would you stay home?
Maybe, yeah.
The truck is sinking.
Devastating flooding has reached catastrophic levels.
Rising sea levels are threatening America's coasts.
You would have to take that house and put it on stilts 10 feet tall. If the street is filled with salt water, what difference does it make how high you make your house?
The concentration of the highest rental rates is exactly where the elevation is highest.
This was the evidence to prove that carbon gentrification was real.
Pay $1,800 in 5 days or you have to leave. Were you scared?
Yes.
Every single person who stood up and said, I am not paying this rent increase, received an eviction.
Haitians built this place and you're getting kicked out.
Yes.
The biggest names in politics.
Whoa, that's news. Do you think that the president has the authority to send in active duty troops?
Face the questions you want answered.
Did the CDC let the American people down? Tell me about the decision. When was it made? Who made it? What is the next area that you are concerned about? What does that mean for the risk of reinfection here in the United States?
You bring up a very good point, Margaret.
Margaret, that's a great question.
Face the Nation with Margaret Brennan on CBS.
Even really young kids are feeling what's going on right now. How should parents be talking to them about this whole question of racial justice?
How do we embrace this moment and turn it into real change?
What we really must focus on is moving from protesting to policy.
It has been a day of raw emotion here as this city and the country mourned a man whose death has inspired a movement. We are witnessing it right now.
State police are here. You can see them behind me. Behind them are the firefighters. They are dousing the flames.
Do you believe there is systemic racism in law enforcement?
Absolutely.
What do you hope comes from this?
This is what's coming from it. The change is here.
The biggest names in politics.
Whoa, that's news. Do you think that the president has the authority to send in active duty troops?
Face the questions you want answered.
Did the CDC let the American people down? Tell me about the decision. When was it made? Who made it? What is the next area that you are concerned about? What does that mean for the risk of reinfection here in the United States?
You bring up a very good point, Margaret.
Margaret, that's a great question.
Face the Nation with Margaret Brennan on CBS.
With 50 days until the election, new polling is painting a clearer picture of the states still in play in the 2020 race. Our CBS Battleground Tracker calls Florida and North Carolina toss-ups. Recent numbers out of Texas also show a tight race between President Trump and Joe Biden there. For more on what this means, let's bring in Jim DeFede, Renuka Ryasum, and Nick Oxner. Jim is an investigative reporter for our Miami station, WFOR. Renuka covers Texas politics for Politico, and Nick is chief investigative reporter for our Charlotte, North Carolina affiliate, WBTV. Welcome to you all. Renuka, Texas has voted for a Republican in every presidential election since 1980, yet recent polls show a close race between President Trump and Joe Biden. What are the factors which might put Texas in play?
Sure. Yeah, that's right. I mean, the last time a Democrat won presidential election here in Texas was Jimmy Carter. And so it's a very conservative state. And I think most folks who are watching the state closely are looking for new voters, people who haven't voted in previous elections, maybe young voters. And this has always been for Texas Democrats for years and years, sort of the promised land for them. What they've pointed to is we're making a case that Texas is in play, that there's a low percentage of people that go to the polls here, and for them, turnout is key. And some of the changes we are seeing in this state are suburbs, fast-growing suburbs around Dallas and Houston and San Antonio are also shifting as people move from other states and as young voters come of age. And I think that those are some of the key things that people will be watching. But one of, I think, the really important things that to think about is that Texas is still, it's a big state. It's going to be hard for a Democrat to win here. They're going to have to spend a lot of money. And rural Texas voters are still very reliably conservative. And so that will be a huge challenge for Biden or any Democrat statewide here.
It's interesting, Renuka, the Biden campaign recently beefed up its staff there. Does that affirm, though, that the Lone Star State might actually be in play?
Yeah, so Biden has staffed up here in Texas. But, I will say Texas Democrats complained during the convention that they felt like Texas Democrats didn't get enough airtime nationally. I think a lot of them feel like it's been a little bit late in the game. I mean, we are, just a few short weeks away from Election Day. Early voting starts pretty soon here. And they feel like it's maybe in some cases too little, too late. But I think what Biden wants to do is show that that he can at least narrow the lead a bit. The polls have shown that for a while Biden was in the lead. Now they're showing that Trump's back in the lead. It's definitely closer than any previous election in recent years for a Republican. But this is a state Trump has to win. If Trump loses Texas, then he loses the presidency. But I think, like I said, what people are watching here is that it's a huge state. There's 254 counties, a lot of different media markets. A Democratic candidate, some have estimated would need to spend $20, $30, $40 million in Texas to keep it in play in November. And, we are seeing some movement by the Biden campaign, but we aren't seeing those huge numbers and that huge investment. And we didn't see that early on.
Well, Jim, Florida, of course, is another key state. It always is a key state. Polls there have tightened in recent weeks. And now you have billionaire former presidential candidate Michael Bloomberg pledging $100 million to the Biden campaign. So how will that money be spent?
Well, my general manager is very happy at the local TV station. The more money being spent in Florida, the better. Look, I think a lot of that money will be used to sort of replace some of the money that the Biden campaign would normally be spending here in Florida. It'll free up Biden to spend money in other battleground states if Bloomberg comes in with $100 million. But even at $100 million, there's only so much airtime that you can buy. A lot of what I'm hearing about is that they're hoping that the super PAC formed by Bloomberg will not just spend it on TV commercial time, but will also help build out more of a ground game. One of the things that the Democrats are sorely lacking in Florida is a get out the vote machinery that is more traditional. Republicans have been doing door knocking. You don't see that in Florida. Florida has not been sending people out door to door to really contact people. You need to hire folks, maybe not to go to doors in a pandemic, but certainly to increase phone banking. So I think you're going to see a lot of money spent on TV, that's for sure. But there's other things that can be targeted. And certainly one of the things that needs to be targeted is increasing Biden support among the Hispanic community here.
Right, because the Democratic presidential nominee is struggling, as you know, Jim, to keep a hold on the Latino vote there. Why exactly might that be? We're talking about actually a very diverse Latino vote within Florida.
Well, that's right. Let me give you some sense of the numbers that we're talking about here. Hillary Clinton won the state of Florida, Hispanic voters within Florida. She lost the state overall, but she won among Hispanic voters by 27 points. When Barack Obama won Florida in 2012, he won Hispanic voters by anywhere for, I think it was around 24, 25 percentage points. Joe Biden is not doing as well. That NBC News Marist poll from a week or so ago that had the race tied actually had Donald Trump winning Hispanics. Now, that poll to me seems like an outlier. I wouldn't believe that Donald Trump is truly winning across the entire state among Hispanics. But other polling that I've seen places the number at around 16 percentage points. In other words, Biden is ahead among Hispanics by 16 points. That's good, but that's not enough. You need to run up that Hispanic vote, particularly in the I-4 corridor, where you have Puerto Rican voters, you have a diverse community. Mexican voters are increasing in numbers, Mexican Americans. So you need to do that. One thing that the Trump campaign has done very successfully in Florida, I'll give them credit for this, they've reached out to evangelical voters who are Cuban American. They've really raised their numbers among Cuban American supports. Donald Trump won among Cuban American supporters the last time, but Hillary Clinton didn't get blown out. Joe Biden appears to be getting blown out among Cuban American voters and even among some Venezuelan voters. And I think that message that the Republicans have been hitting the Democrats with about socialism has had an effect. Biden needs to counteract that, both in terms of increasing his outreach, which he really hasn't done well in Florida. He's been criticized in Florida, especially among Hispanic leaders, for not doing more. He's playing catch up now. He needs to do that in these final weeks if he wants to win Florida.
Well, Nick, let me turn to you. The debate about absentee voting has intensified where you are there in North Carolina. The state attorney general is having to tell voters to not act on President Trump's advice for voters in the state to go to polling places after they send in their absentee ballots. How does the state track a voter's ballot?
Yeah, and it's not just the state attorney general. It's also our state board of elections, after President Trump said that the first time in North Carolina, the board of elections came out and said, don't do that. We have ways for you to track your vote. There are a couple of ways. One, you can call and see if your vote's been received. But actually, just in the last week, the State Board of Elections has rolled out a new online tracking tool where voters can track their absentee ballots online. The state has the ability to tell if your if your ballot's been received, if it's on file at the Board of Elections and will be counted on Election Day. So you have the Attorney General, the State Board of Elections, a number of other state officials saying, don't do what the president is saying to do.
All right, really remarkable developments there. Jim DeFede, Renuka Rysom, and Nick Oxner, really good to have you all with us. Thanks very much. Coming up, should Joe Biden be worried about his support with Black and Latino voters? We'll speak with strategists about that next. Stay with us. You're streaming Red and Blue Countdown to the Vote.
Go to the ends of the earth.
Right now.
We got something crazy.
And reach for the stars.
Here we are.
Time.
Yes, it's my comeback.
Hey, this is pretty fun. But wait, there's more.
Experience thought-provoking,
Welcome to the idea of being a human being.
innovative, and truly original reporting.
Look through a telescope and go, wow.
Because there's always something new under the sun on CBS Sunday morning.
COVID has taken the lives of tens of thousands of Americans. Rural areas like this here on Navajo Nation are especially hit hard.
15 to 30% of our Navajo citizens don't have running water.
In any indigenous reservation, there is a shortage of physicians.
Native Americans are amongst the most vulnerable and hardest hit by COVID.
Yeah, the more we lose our elders to COVID-19, the more we lose our language and our way of life.
We need to bring awareness to the attention of Washington, D.C. and United States citizens that there is a need to focus on the first citizens of this country.
In 60 years, we went from about 100,000 factory workers to probably about 7,000.
Off in the distance, you can see some factories that are still humming, but most of them are just kind of abandoned.
The restaurant industry right now is one of the largest and fastest growing industries in America. And yet it continues to be the absolute lowest paying employer in the United States.
Barely anybody's making enough to live.
You were donating plasma to get by.
It's literally a slave wage.
I don't remember growing up like this. My mom didn't have to go to food banks. It's pretty sad.
Even really young kids are feeling what's going on right now. How should parents be talking to them about this whole question of racial justice?
How do we embrace this moment and turn it into real change?
What we really must focus on is moving from protesting to policy.
Join Gail, Anthony, and Tony on CBS This Morning.
CBSN Los Angeles. Get local news, breaking news, anytime, anywhere.
It's easy to find us, and it's free.
Download the CBS News app on your favorite devices. CBSN Los Angeles, streaming 24/7.
You can watch CBSN 24/7.
We've got an amazing story to share with you.
I understand you have some breaking news.
How does it all play out?
It's quite an adventure here at CBSN.
It's been a day.
Go to the ends of the earth.
Right now.
We got something crazy.
And reach for the stars.
Here we are.
Time.
Yes, it's my comeback.
Hey, this is pretty fun.
But wait, there's more.
Experience thought-provoking,
Welcome to the idea of being a human being.
innovative, and truly original reporting.
Look through a telescope and go, wow.
Because there's always something new under the sun on CBS Sunday morning.
An extraordinary moment in America.
Can you understand the anger that we see over here?
Absolutely. I understand the anger.
Do you think there's systemic racism, and how should we address it?
There's a lot of progress still to be made.
What are the questions white Americans should be asking?
Questions about racial disparities.
The mood of the country now has significantly changed. Do you think when it comes to reforming police in this country and healing race relations in this country, we have reached a tipping point?
So, I've got a question for you. What if you could watch all the CCO news you want and see all your favorite CCOers anytime, anywhere? Well, you can. Go ahead and grab your phone. Come on, I know it's close by. And go to WCCO.com. Or get the app, and poof, there we are, right next to all those other networks you stream. Bonus time, it's free. You heard right, zip nada zilch, for free. CBSN Minnesota, built by CBS News, powered locally by WCCO.
George Floyd's death has inspired a movement. We are witnessing it right now.
I think there's a level of bias in every individual.
Is bias training enough?
It's a start.
We have to talk to people, listen.
What do you think history teaches us about this moment we're in?
This is a time for us not to rest.
Why is it important, do you guys think, to come out?
If we just stayed home, nothing would change.
What do you hope comes from this?
This is what's coming from it, and the change is here.
With new information by the hour,
Governor Charlie Baker has declared
it's never been more important to stay up to date.
You want to keep people safe, and
so wherever you are, whatever time of day, CBSN Boston is here for you.
I want to bring you some breaking news right now.
Boston's only 24/7 live streaming news service from the trusted local journalists at WBZ.
With me is Dr. Malika Marshall.
Watch anytime for free on CBSBoston.com or download the CBS News app. CBSN Boston, always on, always here for you.
President Trump and Joe Biden are tailoring a message specifically targeted at Hispanic voters. That competition was on full display Sunday when the president spoke at a Latinos for Trump event in Las Vegas. Joe Biden is planning to campaign in Florida Tuesday, telling reporters he will, quote, work like the devil to win over Latino voters. The Latino community, like other voting blocs, is not monolithic, but the Washington Post reports Latino groups and some Democrats are worried Biden is falling behind when it comes to outreach and speaking on key issues. Biden campaign senior advisor Simone Sanders addressed these concerns over the weekend.
We know that we have work to do, and we have said from the beginning, and Vice President Biden has been very clear about this, as has Senator Harris, that we are really working to earn every single vote in this country, and we want to earn the votes of the Latino and Hispanic community.
Chuck Rocha joins me now. Chuck is a former senior advisor to Senator Bernie Sanders' 2016 and 2020 presidential campaigns. Welcome to you, Chuck. Thanks very much for being with us. So you headed up Senator Sanders' outreach to the Latinx community. Do you see a disconnect between the Biden campaign and Latinx communities now?
No, I don't see a lack of a connection. I just see a lack of money being spent to make that connection. He makes a connection really strongly with the Latino community. And when you tell a Latino the message that Joe Biden has, he does very well. The fact of the matter is there's just not as much money going to take that message to Latinos as there needs to be. Joe Biden himself has now spent as much money as Donald Trump talking to Latinos, but that alone, as you can see from your numbers, is not enough. I'm currently tracking over $500 million being spent to talk to white voters from outside organizations and super PACs on behalf of Joe Biden, while the three leading super PACs, one of which I will say I run, has only received $5 million worth of funding. That's a $500 million to $5 million gap. And when you have that big a gap going to trying to educate Latinos compared to white voters, that's why you see the drop off in these numbers, I really think.
So you know as well, Chuck, that Senator Sanders won the Nevada caucuses by a landslide in large part due to young and Latinx voter turnout in his favor. What do you think that Joe Biden can learn from that?
Is to go to where they are, show up in these spaces and have a conversation. And during a time with COVID where you can't literally show up at their college, you can't go to their house and knock on their doors. That means, to my original point, that you need to spend even more money delivering a digital ad to their phone, a digital ad to their streaming service. They're not watching TV. They're watching Hulu and YouTube. You need to be texting them. You need to deliver ads where these young Latinos are. What happens with young Latinos most of the time is that they're not a prime voter because they're a new voter. So most campaigns don't go talk to a new or infrequent or a newly registered voter. With the Bernie campaign in the Nevada caucuses, we made a very intentional operation to have a conversation with these younger voters. There's one way to guarantee that you'll never get a young voter's vote is if you don't ask them. Asking them is the thing you need to do in the beginning.
Chuck, let's turn to the pandemic. It has hit the Latinx and Black communities especially hard, both from a health and economic standpoint. What have you heard, Chuck, from Latino voters about this particular issue and what they'd like to see as policy prescriptions to help them get through this time?
Oh, my God, this is a great question, and this is no better time to ask this question than right now. In focus groups that I've been participating with all summer long, as COVID was creeping up and becoming more and more devastating in our community, there's this undertow of anxiety that Latinos describe in real time. More Latinos are laid off. More Latinos are also essential workers. Latinos are more likely to die under COVID. Our children, horrifically, are 8 times more likely to catch COVID than a white child. So what that means to a mother and a father and a grandmother is this anxiety of live, die, feed my family. What happens to my insurance when I lose my job? Do I go to that job? And in the midst of all of this turmoil and all this historical anxiety, we, political consultants like me, still expect for them to be tuned in, know everything about every issue, show up and vote, get everybody in their family to show up and vote when they're literally trying to figure out how to feed their family and stop from dying from a disease.
Right. So, I mean, is the answer, they're not looking necessarily for specifics, but they want to hear COVID-19 and the pandemic talked about as a priority?
Yes, and I should have said that and led with that. Like, that's the number one issue. When I said I've been hearing about it in the focus groups, they care about that the most, and they want Joe Biden to tell them what he's going to do to make their lives better. In these focus groups, when we would say, did you realize that Vice President Biden helped us get out of this catastrophe with President Obama when we came out of that horrible recession we were in? They were like, that's great. That gives him qualifications to get us out of this mess. But they didn't realize that, so we had to have that conversation. It goes back to my original point. If you'll spend the money to say, hey, I'm Vice President Biden, I got us out of that mess, I'll help us get out of this mess, because you can't trust Donald Trump and his opinion, blah, 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 blah. It just goes right on to say exactly what you want to that voter.
Really interesting to hear about that. Chuck Rocha. Chuck, thank you so much. Really appreciate the time.
Thank you.
Here's what's coming up tonight on CBSN. At 6 p.m. Eastern, wildfires raging out west are still burning out of control. Dozens of people have died. We'll get an update from a reporter on the ground. And at 7 p.m., Gulf states are preparing for Hurricane Sally to make landfall overnight. We'll have the latest forecast. That does it for today. You can stream Red and Blue Monday to Thursday at 5 p.m. Eastern. More news after the break. You're streaming CBSN.
These are hard, tiring, taxing jobs, even before coronavirus came.
This is my Clorox wipes, my Lysol. I have no idea what I'm walking into. I don't know if the customers are carriers.
I feel privileged to be out here when so many people are out of work.
Did you ever think that you would find yourselves at the front line?
We have the opportunity to bring something valuable to the community, and that feels good.
We have to be willing to change policy on a permanent basis to recognize and honor these workers.
It doesn't seem like it's worth the risk that you endure every day.
I have to do what I can to take care